I have thought about making this video for several months and I just kept putting it off. But today I'm going to make it because I want to add my voice as a glimpse of another perspective, even though I feel like in a way the perspective that our family offers on this is a very, very small glimpse into the difficulties that a lot of people face. But today I'm going to be talking about straws. Why it's important that plastic straws aren't done away with altogether. And why it's also important that if a person comes into a restaurant or a cafe and says, hey, I need a straw, the answer should be yes. It shouldn't be an interrogation about whether or not they look disabled, because not all disabilities are readily visible. And that's what I'm talking about today. I'm going to kick this off with a personal story. Tessie didn't start eating solid foods until she was really old. She just didn't want to. We were working with her early on therapists and we were pushing really, really hard, but she had really strong oral aversions. She didn't want anything going near her mouth. She was just super, super defensive about us feeding her, we tried all sorts of things. We tried smearing her toys with foods and she would just sit there with her hands out like this. She did not want to eat. She was still nursing at that point. We also were trying to introduce a sippy cup. I spent a lot of money on sippy cups. I bought basically every single sippy cup in Babies R Us. This was back when Babies R Us was still a store. Finally one day I bought a sippy cup and it had a straw, and then the straw on the bottom had a weight that would bend around. Tessie was about 15 months old at this point. It was starting to become clearer and clearer that even though I was drinking water nonstop all the time, that she wasn't getting enough liquids to keep her from becoming dehydrated. This became really apparent when her apnea monitor, because she has central apnea, and over the course of several nights when she was 15 months old, we watched as her pulse started going up higher and higher and higher. By like the third or fourth night, her resting pulse was 150. I had called the nurse's line and she was still having a few wet diapers a day and they weren't really worried, and Maggie happened to have an EEG that day, and the ICU doctor who had treated Tessie just happened to be there at the EEG, and I mentioned to him what was going on, and he was almost panicked when he heard about her pulse and said that she needed to be hospitalized because of dehydration. At that point, I had been away from the house for a long time with Maggie for her EEG, and my mom happened to be home, and I called her and told her to start pushing fluids, otherwise Tessie was going to be hospitalized. And I had been pushing all the sippy cups and pushing all the sippy cups. Nothing worked. And the thing that finally worked at 15 months was that I was away from the house, so she didn't have the option to nurse on me. She must have been very, very thirsty. And with my mom home coaxing her that day, she finally figured out how to use a straw. She drank cup after cup after cup of water. By the time we got home and we put her monitor on her, her pulse was lower. I called her doctor's office and told them everything, and they said just to keep watching her, and if she kept drinking water, she should be fine and we wouldn't have to bring her in. But I start this story with that just to tell you how difficult it has been, this process of getting her and keeping her hydrated. It is way easier than it used to be. I can give her this sippy cup now and she'll drink out of it all day. I can give her just about any sippy cup and she'll drink out of it and she'll be totally fine. What I absolutely cannot do is give her an open cup and have her drink out of it. She's been working on it in therapy for months now. For anyone who's new here, Tessie is 3 years old. She's on the autism spectrum. She's in therapy 5 days a week. And if I were to give her an open cup, she would dump it on the ground and try to lick it off of the ground because she cannot figure out how to drink out of a cup. And we've all been working with her on it and it just hasn't quite clicked yet. Sippy cups work for us. And I try to always have a sippy cup with me or something like this with me. Sometimes I forget. I'm human. I have 5 kids and sometimes I'm rushing around. Sometimes the sippy cup isn't in my bag. Sometimes it gets left behind. This happened more in the past because it used to not be a big deal. We could go to any restaurant. We could get a kid's cup and it had a little cap on it, it had a straw in it, and she could hold that and she could drink it herself, and we were totally fine. Knowing that I could do that, I didn't really think that much about bringing sippy cups with us everywhere. At least it wasn't something that was urgent. But that has begun to change. The first time I really noticed it, we were actually out of town and we were several hours away from home, and I looked in my bag and her sippy cup was not there. We'd taken it out to wash it and I just hadn't put it back in there. And we got to this little restaurant and we all sat down to eat, and they brought out the drinks. And the straws looked like straws. As soon as Tessie got hers and it touched her mouth, she could tell that it was different. She chewed that paper straw to bits and was literally trying to eat it in a matter of moments. And I asked if they had any other straws, and the waitress kind of gave me a funny look and was like, no. Maggie did the same thing. Maggie at least can drink out of an open cup. The risk of spilling is kind of high, but she can at least manage to drink out of a cup and get her drink. Whereas with Tessie, that is not an option. I can literally hold it up to her, and when it touches her lips, she will spit it out if I do that. So that's not a choice. That's not a possibility at this point in time. We were hours away from home. We hadn't seen any stores because we were kind of in like the touristy part of town where it was all like boats and restaurants. There wasn't any place that we had seen that would sell a sippy cup. It wasn't like there was CVS that we had driven by or anything like that. And it quickly became clear that for Tessie, a paper straw just wouldn't work. It couldn't work because of the texture. As soon as it got in her mouth, she would chomp down on it, it would collapse, and it was no longer usable, and she couldn't drink her drink. Silicone straws, we've had much the same luck with them. We have bought some silicone straws, which I think would be the best option for her, and somehow this one that is like super thick that's on her water bottle is the one that survived. But in all the other ones, she and Maggie have completely just chewed them, basically kind of chewed them up and eaten them. And a metal straw for either of them would just be dangerous because it wouldn't be a good idea. Ultimately, that's what happened to that first cup. She chewed up and destroyed the silicone straw on that first cup like it was a teether when she was supposed to be drinking, and that was the end of the first cup. But the good thing was it lasted long enough that she learned how to use straws, and it sort of saved the day. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Straws were originally invented to help people with disabilities. We need to at least keep them around for that purpose. They should at least be in restaurants for that purpose. If a person with a disability needs one, they should be able to access those in the same way they can access a handicap stall, because being able to drink is a pretty basic need. There are still people who need them, like Tessie at this point. We found one of these new sippy cups that has kind of a rim around it that she can drink out of, and I'm really hoping that that is going to help her understand the concept of drinking out of the edge of a cup, that along with the hard work of her therapists alongside Tessie's own hard work will get her to the point where soon this whole straw thing won't be an issue for our family at all. At the moment it is, and I'm a little bit grateful for that because it has given me a little bit extra perspective that I wouldn't have otherwise had. Being good stewards of our environment is really important, but so is making sure that people who can't drink in other ways are able to have access to this utensil that makes it possible for them to drink. I think it's great that there are now more and more alternatives and different lids that don't need straws. I just hope that the option for straws for people who need it remains, because there are people who actually need them to be able to drink. That's it for today. If you like this video, we would love it if you'd give it a thumbs up, and if you're interested in all things autism, we would love it if you'd hit subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.